So with Android 16 coming really soon, it had us thinking and mulling over that the big yearly overhaul or upgrade for Android is now done. We're at a stage where differences are now so minimal that it's really hard to tell each update apart, and we catalogue every minute change. The fact is, Android updates don't matter as much as they used to, and we're going to get into just why you're here. Before then though, if you want Android news, you are in the right place. We deep dive into all of the changes from the smallest to the biggest, even if there isn't as much as there used to be, so stick around and hit subscribe. Cheers. So Android has basically hit a stage where big usability changes are really few and far between. Most of the bases are practically covered now, save some accessibility options which slowly get added in here and there, and extended functions that might appeal to a specific, smaller subset of users. Think things like that dedicated desktop mode which is still in the works. It actually looks like it could be an incredible productivity tool to many people, but it isn't necessarily the most important aspect of Android. You can see this right from Android 12 through to Android 15 and that upcoming Android 16 release as we've been delving into here on the channel. We're getting really minimal changes visually and functionally. The biggest differences we've had in recent years is probably private space maybe. Beyond that, it's mostly tweaks and tuning. Thinking outside of the box though, there are features like Quick Share, which is a core part of Android. That's a big feature, but it can run on practically any device so long as you have Android 6, yes, Android 6 or newer. It even works on Windows with a pre-installed application. Theft protection is another example of this. Both of these features have rolled out with Play service updates and work on all phones running Android 10 or higher, and this is one of the reasons why we're not necessarily seeing as many changes with those OS releases. Google also introduced QPR releases for the Pixel series in that post-Android 12 era back in 2021. These quarterly releases also deliver more significant updates and are now decoupled from those major yearly signposted Android upgrades. They run concurrently with the Android beta releases and are a key selling point for the Pixel lineup as they're repackaged as what we showcase here on the channel, feature drops or pixel drops. I think it's a combination of these things that really muddles the water. It's hard to deny that each release is starting to feel like a monthly patch, and that's been more pronounced over the past couple of releases, basically just with an extra lick of paint on top of that. In many ways, oddly, I think that can be considered a good thing. Change for the sake of change means people get annoyed, frustrated and disappointed in equal measure, and you tell us that every single time we delve into an Android update. Bugs get introduced with extra changes and unnecessary changes, and software developers can be known for changing things for the sake of change, and that's not always a good thing, and especially for Android, which is nice and mature at this stage. Realistically, visually and functionally, where you're going to get the most variation is in third-party skins like Oxygen OS, One UI and HyperOS, and you knew this anyway. Effectively, these allow you to choose what you want from Android in terms of deeper functionality. Samsung has traditionally been the flag bearer for added features and throwing the kitchen sink in there, going way back to those earliest days of TouchWiz, which itself was a very polarizing Android skin. This isn't as pronounced now as Google's AOSP core has realistically and slowly enveloped a lot of these features that are first seen on third-party skins from those OEMs. One of the biggest complaints that we have though is that Google is just really slow at adding these things to its own version of Android, or the core version of Android, and therefore its Pixel phones. In fact, the company can also take backwards steps in its own versions. We lost a little bit of the all-important customization, if you remember this, with the shift from Android 11 to Android 12, and it's still not yet been added back in, although there are rumours that it could be with Android 16 and newer builds. Dynamic colour and material hue have been the area of, in air quotes, customization, but they're just fairly automated theming functions. You can't really do much without installing a new home screen launcher on Pixel phones if you want that added level of customization that you can see on other skins out there. On top of that, on Pixel phones, apps are where exclusivity is starting to rear its head. Look at the Pixel 9 series. They get a few features that, at least in theory, should work fine on older phones. Pixel Studio, Pixel Screenshots, and to a lesser extent features like Reimagine and Add Me for the camera are all basically or shouldn't be a problem for modern smartphones. Instead, they're limited to those latest phones, not the OS version you have. Realistically, on top of that, there isn't as much fragmentation with the OS version with those third-party skins like there used to be, but rather the features found within them. Oppo and OnePlus have lots of controls that you won't find on Samsung's or Xiaomi's phones, and vice versa. And that's even despite a smaller or similar core feature set. These brands led the way with extras like dark themes, gaming modes, and enhanced camera functions. Google has been really slow to get these integrated, but things have slowly drip-fed through with each passing Android update, and it's one of those things that basically means that you're going to get these features later down the line with Pixel phones, but you may have to wait a while to get them. And as someone who cares about changes and even the tiniest little additions, I found myself more drawn than ever before to these alternative builds, as at least since Android 12, those number of changes that we're seeing on Pixel phones year over year has diminished quite drastically. It's almost impossible to tell Android 12 from that upcoming Android 16 build unless you know what to look for. And that's not the case with looking at Oxygen OS and Oxygen OS 15, or One UI 5 and One UI 7. The updates there are huge in comparison, and the extra functions are just those really nice value adds that is going to make you potentially pick one of those phones over Google's vanilla version on Pixel phones. You might also note that Google has been adding features within existing applications, which are available across Android more heavily in recent years. I think Google Photos is a perfect example for this, as with a certain actual subscription fees on Google One, you'll get features like Magic Editor, and it's always adding even more options to elevate the experience when using Google Photos itself. Gemini is another prime example. It isn't just a chatbot like it was in the early Bard days. It has visual capabilities, which we've delved into onto the channel. Go check that out. I think it's a really good feature, but that's another route Google has taken entirely. The thing is, apps are still a core component of any phone, despite what some people may have you believe. First-party apps can effectively compensate for OS shortcomings by adding functionality without requiring that full system update that we're used to, and we're seeing this utilised more and more with each passing year. Realistically, the reason for this is probably because it's quick, it's simple, and it makes sense to update an app rather than the phone. There could be another force at play though when it comes to lack of stuff, as it were, when we think about Android upgrades. OEMs and Google have pushed to increase support windows, which is really good in a lot of cases, and at 7 years, a modest phone now might have a great deal of difficulty in terms of running certain features, but it means you're going to be safe and secure for the long term. I think realistically Google has kind of dealt with this before by limiting certain options or making certain options only available on the newest phones, at least those that are eligible for each update. In some ways this does create a tiered situation where, at least in practice, you may have the same Android number or Android version, but you'll lack some of those specific core functions or top selling functions. You can't always be certain your phone will get a specific functionality, and while I do think it is really frustrating and annoying, this is one of the only ways most smartphone makers now can truly differentiate their newest devices from those older models. It's also hard to sell a shiny new phone when the old phone has all of the same features and works just as well. At the end of the day, capitalism is going to capitalise after all. So I've had a theory recently that the ubiquity of AI and Gemini and how it's decoupled from full Android OS updates might actually be the future of the platform. Think about it for a second. As Android has developed over the past few years, we're seeing more and more functions become part of Play system updates. Think Quick Share and theft protection that I mentioned earlier, and these are being used rather than offering full operating system releases, but they are important functions as part of Android wholesale. I think Gemini is a bit of a different beast though, as the recent Astra-powered visual functionality only requires a network connection and an app update. So if Gemini starts to become a core part of the Android OS, it means updates will be pushed even faster, or can be pushed even faster, to more devices out there, meaning on top of that, you don't need to wait for those yearly releases that we still covet so much here on the channel. Android 16 itself has a bit of a problem, as it's being released in two parts. The first minor release, if you've seen here on the channel that we've delved into, doesn't really have much by way of features, but it is expected to lay the groundwork for further and deeper AI integration, although we haven't seen that just yet. If this is going to be true, or if this is true, then Gemini might be the future of Android, whether you like it or not. Realistically though, I have to say I think Android itself needs more fixes for bugs and problems that you're going to encounter day to day. A fresh lick of paint is really nice, and I would love to see that, but with each Android upgrade, it isn't going to solve those things like poor battery life, scroll lag, or disappointing camera performance, some of the things that inherently affect Pixel phones. Concerns and frustration aside though, it is hard to deny that Android's come a really long way in a short space of time. I think it's a great place to be, and I wouldn't be anywhere else in terms of my mobile itself. And I think there is really a lot to love in just about every phone that you happen to use. And one of the greatest strengths of Android is the options that you have available to you if you do want to pick up a device. I think like the past 4 or 5 updates, temper your expectations. Don't expect Android 16 to reinvent the wheel. It's going to be a fairly small first phase release. Maybe we'll get bigger changes later down the line, but I'm not expecting major overhauls because at the end of the day, Android is pretty safe and stable where it is for now. What do you think? Do you miss those big updates like we do? It is hard to deny that those big updates really were exciting, not necessarily as exciting as it used to be, and there's a combination of factors that I've laid out here in this video. Let us know in the comment sections below what you think. What do you think is actually the biggest update in Android's history? I think a lot of people point to Marshmallow. Personally, I still think it's Android 12 because it was such a huge and drastic overhaul and it's not like anything else out there. But yeah, let me know what you think down in the comment sections below. And until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you later.